Welcome to a Friday afternoon live stream of Mile High Reefers. I'm Scott Anderson, and today we're going to talk about why I am addicted to soft coral. Soft coral is quickly becoming one of my favorite corals. So while we're waiting for people to come in, I'm going to take a minute and we'll talk about some of the channel stuff that's been going on, quick little review of what's been going on, and then we'll get right in to soft corals. So if you saw last week's video, I did an update on the 24-gallon nano. 24-gallon nano's killing it. And I also talked about wanting a new camera. Well, as fate had it, I got a camera. Actually, I got hundreds of cameras. It's insane. See all of those boxes? That is literally hundreds upon hundreds of vintage cameras. I have no idea what I'm going to do with them all, but actually I have ideas. I don't have any plans right now. We'll figure it all out, but it's craziness. Before that was Biggs Lagoon. Biggs Lagoon was awesome. I love that store. I love those guys. So we're starting to get some people in now. So let's go ahead and start talking about soft corals. So anybody out there, if you have questions about anything, go ahead and put them in the comments, and I'll start by talking about soft corals. And once we get towards the end of the soft coral conversations, we will get to the questions, comments, and really it's Friday afternoon and I can hang out till dinner time. So we got tons of time to do whatever you guys want, but if we run out of questions, we'll quit. So soft corals are quickly becoming one of my favorite corals. I've always loved soft corals, but lately, really over the last 2 years, they've really started becoming more of a focus of my aquarium keeping. And a lot of that, I think, just has to do with the shape and flow and colors in the tank. So a lot of corals give you some shape, and a lot of corals give you some flow, but soft corals are incredibly diverse in this. We've got mushrooms that'll kind of cover a rock, same with zoas. We've got big leathers that'll grow up and look like bushes and trees. We've got toadstools, which are just these crazy little toadstool looking things. They are fantastic. They are fun. And that's really kind of, I think, what draws me into it. It's that shape and color and flow. I'm one to sit back on my couch and stare at my tank. I mean, my personal setup is I set my laptop up on the table in front of my couch, and I'll just sit there and watch a show, and I'll watch the tank. I'll spend hours doing this, and it's the best thing. But the corals that really stand out when I'm sitting on the couch are the big leathers. They're especially those big toadstools, those big devil's hands. I mean, the bubble's in there too, but the bubble's amazing. But when you're sitting back on the couch, you see these big, huge corals sticking up, blowing in the waves. They have nice tentacles sticking out. The clowns will swim through them. You see the fish going around and through them. And for me, that really is part of the tank. It's not just looking at it real close, like through a macro lens, like what you would see on a Facebook post. It's sitting back and enjoying the entire thing. And that's where a lot of your big soft corals are amazing. But also, we, as reefers, we're obsessed with colors. We're obsessed with variation. And we get that in soft corals as well. And that's kind of some of this resurgence we've seen over the last 10 years in things like zoanthids and mushrooms. When I got into this hobby, it was crazy because my local reef store would sell zoanthids for $1 a polyp. It didn't matter which one. So, I mean, you could go in, you'd see a rock, and you pretty much knew how much it cost because he'd sit there and count the polyps. It was $1 a polyp. Certain polyps these days, that sounds really cheap. But I mean, if you had a good eye, you got some really cool stuff, really cheap. But zoanthids are amazing because they're super easy to take care of. They're absolutely gorgeous. They're bright. They're beautiful. And they propagate pretty easily. And that's part of one of the things I like in this hobby. The reef aquarium, for me, is something that grows and thrives. It's dynamic. And we get that with soft corals. If you've ever had slow growing LPS, it'll be years sometimes before you see a change. But fast growing soft corals can make big changes fast. And a lot of us as new hobbyists, that's kind of what we're looking for. But along those same lines, we're also getting the same kind of things with mushrooms. Mushrooms used to be relatively inexpensive. They're kind of a noob coral that, advanced aquarists didn't really care about. But then we started getting some amazing, colorful strains, and mushrooms are amazing. They're cool. The only thing that drives me insane about mushrooms is the way they come off of frags. If you've ever attached a mushroom to a frag, it's a pain in the butt. And then if you've ever lost that new mushroom that you bought off the frag, it is the most annoying thing. So that's the downside. But once those mushrooms settle in, they're pretty much there. But it's cool because the mushrooms will kind of move over time. And the way they propagate is they leave a little piece of themselves behind. So they move just a little bit, and then that little piece of themselves grows out of there, and you have two mushrooms, and they'll just keep doing that and spreading. It's really awesome. So we've got super bright, amazing corals that rival the best acros for macro photography in zoanthids and mushrooms, but for the most part, they're super easy, though there are corals that are going to mess with you, like the Pacific Yumas. So Yumas were one of those that I struggled with when I first started using them. Mushrooms, they like relatively low light, relatively low flow, and every Yuma I would ever get would just go in and die. Well, reason is turns out those Pacific Yumas love high light, high flow. They thrive there. I mean, who would have guessed that these mushrooms would have wanted the same conditions that acros want? They want to be up on the top, in the light, in the flow. And it's really cool. So I love zoanthids. I love mushrooms because they're bright, they're easy, and they're colorful, and they grow fast. But my real addiction are those leathers. Leathers are just the coolest corals, and there's so much diversity in them. I love toadstools. They're probably my favorite leather, and it's because you get all of that diversity. I'm still trying to get my hands on something similar to Jake's weeping willow. Like, that is my dream coral. No, it's not the Walt Disney, it's not the home wrecker. I want that weeping willow, not because it's the brightest, but because it's maybe the most dynamic coral I've ever seen. It's one that grows, it gets big, but then you have these crazy long polyps that blow in the breeze. Your clowns will swim through them, and it's really awesome. But we get the same thing with other toadstools. My clowns love my toadstools. I have quite a few different ones, and the long tentacles are some of the coolest to see that interaction between the clowns and the toadstools. A long tentacle toadstool is a great anemone replacement. A lot of us, we don't want anemones in our tank for the simple fact that anemones like to walk around and sting coral. I absolutely love bubble tips, but I don't have a rose bubble tip in my tank anymore because they move. They won't go where you put them. They sting stuff. They are a pain. But you don't get that problem with a toadstool. They don't sting stuff. They don't hurt stuff. And they're beautiful. They're dynamic. And I love that about toadstools. You get tons of different ones. But then So you get toadstools. Those are cool. Right along those lines, you've got the sarcophagus and devil's hands. Those are just cool because the shapes that come out of them. And white is a color you don't see in corals very much. But if you look at the ends of a lot of polyps, you get a lot of white tips on the ends of the leathers. So that's pretty cool. It's just a color you don't see much, but you get it in there. Now, I will admit, on the downside with leathers, you don't get some of the crazy colors you're going to get out of acros and LPS. I mean, really, you're looking at browns, pinks, and greens. But within those spectrums, there's some absolutely amazing ones. And some of them are things that play tricks on you, like my Kaleidoscope. And I named it that. It's not really named that, but I'm calling it the Mile High Reefers Kaleidoscope toadstool leather. But it's the coolest thing. I'll probably end up doing a video on this all by itself. But it's a big, long tentacle thing. It's up in the top of my tank. But when the light shines down on it, the base lights up blue because it's reflecting the blue light coming off of my lights. But it looks blue to the eye. As far as anybody can tell, that looks blue. And then the stalks coming off are pink, and you have those white tips, and then it's blowing around in the water. And it really does look like a kaleidoscope. You know, those things you looked at when you were a little kid. You'd turn it and they'd move. That really is what it looks like to me. And it's one of the coolest things. And what else is really cool is all of these corals were cheap. Every one of the leathers I have in my tank can be purchased for well under $100, probably less than 50, and probably less than 30 if you go for a little frag, if you can find frags. Frags are a different thing, which maybe we'll get to in a minute. So that's really cool. And it's just that kind of diversity. It's a different look than what I'm getting out of my LPS and SPS. Now, I'm not ragging on LPS and SPS. I'm a huge fan of them. But lately, it's the soft corals that are drawing me in because I'm noticing all these things like that kaleidoscope type thing. I'm really interested in maybe trying to find some cool lobophytums. They're usually kind of brown and pink and dull greens, but I'd be real interested in finding some of the yellows that exist or some of the brighter greens. Those are cool. Lobophytums, for those of you who don't know, they are often called devil's hands, but they're the big, thicker ones that go up. They're not the toadstool-looking sarcophagus styles. A little more rare in the hobby, but really cool. Another cool soft coral I think we all love are pulsing zinnias. Pulsing zinnias. When I started in this hobby, like everybody thought of them as a garbage coral, and I think a lot of people still look at pulsing zinnias as a garbage coral. Pulsing zinnia are not garbage corals. They are one of the coolest corals in the hobby. I will always have zinnia in my tank. You have these pink little corals that grow fast, but when you stop the water flow, they're the only thing in the tank that's still moving. They'll sit there and move their own polyps. A lot of speculation's been done on it. Originally, I thought it was a feeding thing. When I first got in the hobby, it has nothing to do with feeding. Turns out, by opening and closing, they're actually creating their own water flow around the coral. And that's just the coolest thing. I mean, we're talking about an animal that looks like a plant, and none of the rest move except for water, except for this weird little zinnia that goes up and does that. And then, of course, we have the whole non-photosynthetic side of soft coral keeping, which is this holy grail of just amazing, beautiful coral that we all wish we could keep. And I keep looking at those dendros and stuff and thinking, man, I want some. But there's so many that are so, and dendros, I said the wrong one. Anyways, I look at all these non-photosynthetics and that say, geez, I hope we get to the point where someday I can have some of those, even if it has to be its own dedicated tank. So let's take a quick break right now, and I'm going to remind everybody that if you are interested in having questions answered about pretty much any reef related subject, throw them in the comments over here and we'll go through them as soon as we're done talking softies, which yeah, hopefully we'll be on softies because I love softies. Softies are fun. Yeah, so soft coral are some of the coolest corals around. They're super easy. They're like my favorite beginner coral. If you're looking for a coral that you want to put in a tank and just grow into work, a soft coral is really kind of a no-brainer. They don't have any real alk or calcium requirements. I mean, we want to keep it to regular reef levels, but if you just have a softy tank, you probably don't even need to check your calcium and alkalinity. They're not really going to use that calcium and alkalinity up. So you don't have to worry about it. So if you want to get into the reef aquarium hobby and you aren't at the point where you want to come home and test and do all that kind of stuff and worry about it, soft corals are fantastic. I mean, you could do a small tank, some zoas, a couple of leathers, and a couple of clownfish, and it would be the easiest possible tank to keep. I mean, freshwater, easy to keep. A little tank, skimmer in the back, nice light on it, and the only real maintenance you're going to have to do is water changes. That's it. And if you really wanted to get advanced, you could try to run it without water changes. But why? It's just so easy to run and maintain a tank like that. It's the easiest thing. So we have a coral that's beautiful, it's dynamic, and for the most part, super easy. Now there are exceptions to every rule. We all love the yellow Fiji leathers that we can no longer get in the United States. Difficult coral. I'm not really sure what the key is on this. I have a feeling it's light and flow. If you look at our tanks, we think they're really bright, and people put their par meters in and they see a number pop up like 700 and think it's a lot. Real reefs, like 1500 par is not uncommon. Those yellow Fiji leathers are relatively close to the surface. They're getting crazy flow and they're getting crazy light. We're talking the tropics, direct sunlight, shallow water, with par readings that are well beyond what any reefer would run here. Now, unfortunately, I can't test this theory because yellow Fiji leathers are incredibly rare in the United States right now. That's a whole U.S. government thing, and that sucks. But yeah, so there are exceptions to every rule, and some will mess with you, like those Yumas I was talking about. Mushrooms that want to be where acros are, high light, high flow. What the heck? So yeah, soft coral are some of my favorite. So let's start going through the questions and we'll talk about those and we'll see where this leads. So we got Nick. Hi, Nick. How are you? Matt's Marine Madness. Hi, how are you doing? Abel Plant, you've got a real reef voice. Thank you. Or a real radio voice. Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, I have no professional training at this. People say I move my head too much. I try not to, but honestly, I am who I am, and I appreciate the good feedback. And, you know, as long as people are nice, I appreciate the bad feedback too. Like if I'm doing stuff you want me to fix, let me know. My goal is always to improve. I'm always trying to improve myself, my tanks, everything I do. That's how we grow as people. Ricardo Costa, hi from Portugal. Hi, Ricardo. Matt's Marine Madness, Birmingham. I would love to make it to the UK. You guys have the best. I'm not sure you're close to Aaron's aquarium, but man, I'd love to see his shop. He did such a cool job in that splatter job he did with the bright colors and everything and the black lights. I love it. That is the coolest story. He did a fantastic job. Rich Wright, evening from the UK. Good evening. It's a hot July afternoon, so hiding out in a nice cool basement seemed like a good idea to me. And of course, live stream, hanging with you guys on a Friday afternoon. Can't beat that. Midwest Monsters, what's up, Mike? I love softies. Me too. Softies are so great. Priscilla. Hello, Priscilla. How are you? At work, but hit the thumbs up. I appreciate it. I really need to get down to your shop again. Boulder, Colorado has some amazing stores. Priscilla's out there. She's doing some pretty cool stuff, especially some shrimp breeding. So I need to get down there and check that out again. It's been about a year since I've made it down to Boulder. Let's see what we got. Canby, help me. My 3 neon tetras are trying to kill each other. I think one is pregnant in an 8-gallon tank. I'm going to be real honest. I haven't kept tetras in about 15 years. Here's what I remember about neons. They're kind of a pain. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if you do have some mating aggression going on there. I remember looking up how to breed them years ago, but I don't remember what it takes. I'm going to confess to you guys, as far as aquariums go, I'm like so narrow-minded. Freshwater, I did a long time ago. I know it from the old days, but as far as what's cool these days, I haven't kept up on it. And then even like the saltwater hobby, I'm like so reef related. I get all these questions about angels and all that kind of stuff. If it's not a reef safe fish, I don't pay attention to it like I should. I mean, one of these days I would love to set up a big tank and put whatever fish in I want and then try to make corals work around those fish. It's kind of a dream. I'll probably never have the money or the time, but it sounds like fun. Is a Kenya tree a good coral? Absolutely. Kenya trees are great corals. They can be picked up very inexpensively. They're super easy. When it's time to frag them, a lot of times the branches will just drop off. They'll fall down and attach to the rock down below. Or you can just take a razor blade, slice it off, attach it, share it with your friends. If your local store wants it for trade-in, they're so common, they're so inexpensive, they're so easy, but they're cool. Like, expensive isn't what makes something cool. I mean, you get, and I love them, especially in nano tanks, because you get this tree look that you can sit there and manage. Little tip to fragging for nano tanks. The goal is to kind of keep stuff small, and it's real hard to kind of bonsai a coral. Well, the trick is once your colony gets big, just snip off one of the bigger frags, glue that in place, and sell off the colony. I do that all. Oh, I don't sell them off. They go into one of the holding tanks. But yeah, I love doing it that way. Brent Piper, what parameters do you need to keep in check for soft corals? Okay, soft corals are pretty darn easy. We're looking, salinity is our biggest, right? So as far as water parameters, salinity is going to be a big one. They're not going to be as sensitive as some corals to nitrate and phosphate swings. And in fact, I think they're going to want in fact, I know they want small amounts of nitrates and phosphates in the water. The problem with nitrates and phosphates right now is we all know they need it. But for years, we all ran ultra low nutrient tanks because it kept our algae down and we had nice coral growth and stuff, but it's not actually what's best for the coral. The problem is trying to maintain nitrates and phosphates at a certain level is really hard. So what a lot of people are doing right now is more of the dosing of nitrates, which is kind of weird because now we're keeping ultra low nutrient systems. Sometimes people are even using carbon dosing and then putting nitrates in there to bring the nitrate levels up. So it's almost like we're doing the same thing with calcium and alkalinity as the tank uses it. We're adding more. It's real weird. As far as I'm concerned, I just run relatively low and try not to run at zero. It's not perfection, but it's probably the easiest way to do it. Like I said earlier, calcium, alkalinity, they're not that big of a deal. And if all you're running are softies, that's pretty easy. Light and flow, those are big ones. A lot of soft corals are going to like good flow and a lot of light. Obviously, a lot of your mushrooms are going to be a little different. They like to, some like really high light, like we're talking about, but a lot of them like lower light, so light and flow. So that's kind of it. Trace elements, for the most part, not that big of a deal. If you've got a good high quality salt mix, it's all baked in. I love it. That's what I love about soft corals. They're the easiest thing. In fact, I am willing to say a soft coral reef tank is easier than a freshwater planted. Oh, and cheaper to set up. I'm willing to bet. Because I mean, we need similar lighting, but we don't need the CO2 injection. We don't need any of that. They're just the easiest corals. As long as you've got good light, good flow, you are in. Let's see. Scott Morrison. Hello from Scotland. Hope you're doing well. Hello, Scotland. Yeah, Scotland is one of those countries I would love to travel to. I've got a lot of Scottish ancestry. Yeah, Scotland. I love it. Mike Johnson. Scott, your tank's looking amazing. Keep it up. Thank you. It's been really difficult. It's been doing really well. I'm sure some of you know about 2 years ago, year and a half ago, something like that, my tank crashed pretty hard. I'm a big believer in running a system more as an ecosystem than anything else. Like, I'm more worried about the whole of the aquarium than what's going on with any one coral. There's a lot of corals I'll use as kind of a canary in the coal mine, but I'm really worried about the entire ecosystem. And for me, a tank is an ecosystem. So when things go wrong, it's really easy to say, yeah, I'm going to rip it all out, start over, and get new. But for me, the real challenge and the real fun and hard work is taking something that's gone horribly wrong and fixing it. And for me, it's a huge accomplishment that I've gotten my tank from that algae-covered mess in the crash to where it is today. Now, let's be clear, my tank's not perfect. I've still got some algae issues downstairs in the frag tanks and stuff like that, but I'm really happy with the way the display looks. And since we're talking about soft corals, I cut that big leather coral up. I'll be cutting other leathers, so I've got a ridiculous number of frags I'm going through. So that's all going to be its own video. And so we're going to go through the process of how I fragged that big leather. We're going to talk about the frag grippers, how long it takes for them to actually turn into toadstools. And then when I'm done, I got to figure out what I'm going to do with it. I ended up off of that big green leather up on top. I ended up with 112 frags. Now, because of the cutting corals and all that, I won't get 112 when I'm done. If I get somewhere in that 50 to 100 range, I think I'll be doing really well. We'll see how many I get. Right now, they're looking pretty good, but we're still at that stage where they still just look like squares of leather that are shedding and nasty, and the frag tank they're in looks terrible because of all of these new nutrients and everything. But hey, it is what it is. It's part of it, and I'm going to document that journey, and we'll go on it as soon as it's time. All right. Matt's Marine Madness. I'm just over an hour's drive from Aaron's. Yes! I want to go to his store. I got to make that happen. Scott Morrison, how did you see my tanks? I may have been confused by something I said. I don't think I've ever seen your... Oh, down below. Oh, Mile High's name is Scott. I got it. Perfect. Okay, cool. Yeah, we're good. I was a little confused. All right, cool. Matt's Marine Madness. Did you ever find out what caused the fatalities with the tanks? I did not. Honestly. I think it was some sort of internal parasite. I don't know. Like, there are services where you can send a fish in and have an autopsy done, or at least there used to be. I don't know. But I'm not going to do that. It all kind of started at once. It hit a lot of tangs at once. That black tang got HLLE, which tells me that it had some sort of nutritional deficiency. A couple of them got those pinched in bellies. I don't know what caused it. Like when the tank crashed, I had a lot of nutrients. That's what caused the algae to spike. And that was all my fault. But that shouldn't have killed the tank. So I'm really not sure what would have caused that. I'm really sad. I had some amazing fish that I absolutely love. That powder blue, those two purples. Yeah, that sucked. That hybrid black was amazing. But I don't know. I still have Rankins, which makes me so happy. I've had that fish for 8 years now. I love it. He's an old fish. He's doing good, though. I hope to keep him for another 8 years. Animal Attraction in Greeley, at one point in time, maybe he still has it, had a blue tang that was pushing 20 years old. So cool. They can live so long. I love it. So, all right. Scott, any chance you have recommendations for online coral shop that has long tentacle leathers like weeping willow? Seem hard to find. Yeah, weeping willows are incredibly hard to find. The true weeping willow strain that Jake Adams has is unobtainium, but we can find ones that look pretty close to it. They're so hard to find. Unfortunately, I don't have that one. They're just not available. It's a Google search for those, and it's one I'm personally on the hunt for. So honestly, if you guys find a weeping willow, I'm interested. I really do want to frag. In fact, I'd trade anybody a frag of pretty much any coral in my tank for a weeping willow. Yeah, gold frog small, I'll give you a frag of that for a weeping willow. Absolutely. Yeah, they're unobtainium. They're just so rare, but it's the one I just want. It's my holy grail coral. But yeah, tons of good places online. eBay is an interesting one. I personally would think about eBay. I see no reasons not to. eBay is going to be kind of as good as the seller, right? So just like anything, you can have garbage sellers or you can have great sellers. I would just look up the reviews. As long as they've been selling and people are happy with what they get, you're probably okay purchasing from eBay. And that might be a good place to find some of those hard to find corals. But I've been watching. I haven't seen some true weeping willows, but I've seen some pretty long tentacle stuff come up there. So yeah, it's one I want. I'm with you on that. Yeah. So according to Jake, the weeping willows were always a little harder to keep, leather coral. So I think that might be part of why we're not seeing them propagated like some of the other toadstools and stuff. Because yeah, I gotta imagine like if somebody had a big weeping willow, $100 a frag wouldn't be out of the question for those guys. So I have to imagine part of the reason we're not seeing a lot is they're rare, combined with the fact that they're difficult, combined with the fact that fragging leathers on its own is its own art form. Yeah, I'm looking for a weeping willow. So, all right, Matt's Madness, your powder blue looked great. Your video on him made me get one. Well, thank you. He was a beautiful fish. I loved that fish. When I got him from a local who had ick and couldn't treat him. When I first saw him, he was the most beautiful fish, and I saw him ravaged with ick, and I decided, you know what, I need to try to save that fish. So the person was trying to save it with like garlic treatments and all that other stuff. And yeah, it's not going to work. I brought him home, put him in copper, and he did great for years. Whatever it is that wiped out the tank, that sucked. The thing I hated about that powder blue is he would chase around my desertini all day. That desertini was 3 or 4 times his size, and he'd just chase him around. He was a little jerk. This time around, I went with the powder brown, and I don't know if it's going to end up being the species difference or just the temperaments of the individual fish. The powder brown has been a model citizen. Like Acantharius tangs have a reputation for being buttheads. This guy is the nicest fish. He's the most calm, chill, cool tang. So I'd love to know if you guys are watching out there, you guys having the same luck with your powder browns? They're absolutely beautiful. Mine's been fantastic. Scott Morrison, no American shops send to Scotland, correct? Corals, I'm meaning. Yeah, and that's a whole CITES issue. It's the government. It's the way the world's set up as far as endangered species and send them around the world and all that kind of stuff. It completely sucks. I don't quite understand why we can't get to the point where we can say that stuff is aquacultured and set that up within our government. My real guess is our hobby is so small that governments around the world, they're not too worried about what such a small industry is doing compared to the problems of the real world, right? We've got COVID, we've got wars, we've got economy issues. The whole world's a mess, and shipping corals from the United States to other countries is not what people are looking for. And it sucks because there's like corals that are known from certain areas. Like Japan has their own coral scene, and corals that made it to Japan and just never made it here. And it'd be great if we could share those worldwide. But really, it seems like the corals end up kind of stuck in one country. I know for a long time, Jack-o'-lantern leptocerus is one of those that the UK was having a hard time getting. Finally, I know you guys have got them now, but they're still expensive over there. I mean, I've seen Jack-o'-lantern and leptocerus go for as little as $10 a frag here. And they're fantastic. They're great. I love them. By the way, my brother lives in Houston. Cool. Yeah, Houston is cool. Well, I mean, literally, Houston's really hot right now. It's July, but Houston's a cool town. My cousin just moved right outside of Dallas, which is pretty cool. All right, Marine Madness. I think it's just a powder blue thing. Mine is also super bully. I agree with that. Well, I haven't owned enough over the time, but I've had a couple of powder browns I've dealt with over the years, and they do seem a little more chill. Powder browns are like the most underrated tang. They are gorgeous. Like the yellow and the red with that dark brownish body. Stunning fish. And it used to be that you could pick a powder brown up for about half the price of a powder blue. Those prices have come up a little bit, so I think people are starting to see just how cool the powder brown is. I chose mine because it was the cooler fish. Well, not so much it was the cooler fish. I'd already had the powder blue, and I'd always wanted that powder brown, so I got it. I love it. It was just shaking things up a bit. As far as fish go, tangs are easily my favorite reef fish. Well, we are about 40 minutes in there, and we are out of questions. So thank you guys for watching this Mile High Reefers live stream. It was really great having everybody in. I love it when people come in, throw a bunch of comments in, and we can really dive into stuff, talk about a subject. And yeah, leather corals. They're my new addiction. I'm loving them. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.